Trigger warning. In this episode, we discuss sensitive topics including stillbirth, fetal demise, blood, decomposition, ptos, and autism.
Hello, and welcome to Sorry for Trauma Dumping. I'm your host, Alex, and today I am joined with a special guest. I'm joined by Kara. Hello, Kara.
Hi, Alex.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I'm super happy you're here. Well, the floor is yours. You are welcome to share anything you'd like today.
Awesome. Okay, so I am here to talk about my son, Finn, who was stillborn back in 2022. So a little bit of background about myself. I have been with my husband for 7 years now. We've been married for almost 2. Back in about 2019 is when we started trying for a kid. Hindsight 2020, we were definitely not ready to start trying for a child at that point in time. We had not been together that long and we were not financially stable, but it's just something that we really wanted. 2 years later, we still hadn't been able to have a kid. You know, I hadn't been on birth control. I'd been trying to track ovulation. Just nothing had really clicked. And we were still young, so I wasn't super concerned, but I knew kind of from family history, my mom has had fertility issues, so I was kind of expecting to have similar problems, which is why I think I wanted to start so early. So after about 2 years of trying, we decided to give up and go back to school and get our shit together. My husband had a bachelor's degree, but he was going to go back to school to get his master's in teaching. And I had previously been an engineering major. I flunked out of Iowa State because life happened, and then I decided that I was going to go back to DMAC and I was going to try to go for respiratory therapy. Well, 1 semester into the respiratory therapy program, I found out I was pregnant with Finn. You know, the second you stop trying is when they say that that's going to happen, and of course it never happens at a convenient time, but despite inconvenient timing, we were super excited and ready to be parents, so we worked it out. The pregnancy, though, was a lot harder than I expected. It was really difficult from the beginning. I was completely sick, could not stop vomiting. 6 weeks, I started bleeding.
Oh, no.
And we went to the ER, and they found a subchorionic hemorrhage at that point. So subchorionic hemorrhage is essentially just a space where the placenta doesn't quite implant, or the sac at that point. There's really no placenta yet, I don't think, but where it doesn't quite attach to the uterus fully, and there's a hemorrhage in between it. So that can either lead to miscarriage or it can completely resolve on itself, but either way, heavy bleeding is common with that. So we were just told by the ER at that point that it was a waiting game to see if we were having a miscarriage or not, which was really defeating, leaving the ER with no answers. Obviously, they're not OBGYNs in the regular ER, so they can't really give you a whole lot. But we went to the OB for our first ultrasound like a week or so later, and the subchorionic hemorrhage was still there, but baby was doing great. So we weren't really concerned. They said that it didn't look like I was having a miscarriage, so we continued on. A few weeks in, I was working full-time at BioLife as a phlebotomist, and then also doing school full-time and all of the things. And I was also working at the hospital part-time as a respiratory tech through my respiratory therapy program. So it was a little bit too much for me to be doing while pregnant, so I ended up dropping out of school and making the decision to focus a little bit more on myself and work at BioLife and get my maternity leave, which would be what I needed because they had really, surprisingly, had very good benefits at BioLife. So
good to know.
Yeah, we went through. It's not. I don't necessarily recommend working there because it's a very fast-paced, annoying schedule type deal, but the benefits are great.
Yeah.
So I got about 18 weeks in, and I lost complete feeling of my hands. because my hands were so swollen. And, working as a phlebotomist, that's not exactly the ideal situation because you can't feel somebody to poke them. So I ended up having to move up front to medical screening because there was no way that I could continue with my job like I was doing it, and I was so swollen and so tired and walking around on the floor, I just couldn't do it anymore. And then around 20 weeks, at 20 weeks, we had our anatomy scan. And my husband wasn't there, but my friend Ari came with me because since my husband was in school, he was working part-time at Lowe's and he couldn't really get time off because retail is awful and they don't let you have personal lives. So my friend Ari went with me for our anatomy scan, and we already knew he was a boy because we did the blood test and genetic testing prior. So we had already done our gender reveal and we knew we were having a boy, so that wasn't a big shock for us there. But it just seemed like it was taking a really long time. Obviously, this was my first anatomy scan, so I didn't really have any idea what I was going into, but it just felt like it was taking a really long time, and she kept going over the same spot. And I was like, this is weird. Mm-hmm. So then she comes back, and she says that she couldn't get a good view of something, so she needs to do an internal ultrasound instead of over the belly. So I was like, yeah, by all means, go for it. You do what you need to do. And being an ultrasound tech, she can't really give me definitive answers. So you have to wait for the doctor. But she was able to tell me because Dr. Drake at Perinatology, she has since retired, but she is an amazing human. But Dr. Drake was not available to come talk to us. So she gave the ultrasound tech permission to kind of give us a heads up of what they were looking at. What Finn had was called marginal cord insertion, which is not major by any means, but it's an issue with where the umbilical cord attaches to the placenta. So if you look at the placenta, it's kind of like a football where it's thicker in the middle and thinner on the ends. The umbilical cord should be attached in the middle at that thicker part because that's where all the blood vessels are. Finn's was attached way at the end, so less blood flow, essentially. So the only thing that they said they were going to do with that was do more growth ultrasounds every 4 weeks instead of longer periods like you would in a lower risk pregnancy.
Right.
And that turned out fine because I was we were going to have extra ultrasounds anyways because I had other medical issues that needed attention with pregnancy. And who doesn't like extra pictures of their baby? Who doesn't get to see them more? Who doesn't like not getting to see them more often?
Exactly.
So we kept doing that. Around 30 weeks, we had our baby shower. We announced his name. His name is Finnegan Reed Bonnell. Finnegan we chose because, so it's spelled F-I-N-N-E-G-A-N. My maiden name is actually Egan, so E-G-A-N. So it kept my last name in his first name. Since there aren't a lot of boys in my family, we were able to kind of continue that last name. And it was just super exciting. We were ready for him to be there. We got all of our stuff. All of our friends and family celebrated with us. And then maybe a day or so later, I started having reduced movement. And maybe me, I've got a lot of medical trauma previously where I'm if I go in and I talk to somebody about this, they're going to blow me off. They're not going to believe me. But I went in and I went in and I went in and I went in and they kept telling me everything was fine. They would do non-stress tests and he would be good. And they just couldn't give me any answers. One of the doctors told me when they get bigger, they start moving less, which is absolutely not true. I don't want anybody to ever think that that's real. It's not true at all. I think she probably meant to say it in a way that's as they get bigger, their movements change, which can be true, but they don't decrease. He was a very active baby, and I was probably able to get 10 kicks within a matter of 5 minutes normally. At that point, I had been getting maybe 1 kick in 2 hours, and it wasn't normal for him. Mm-hmm. But Friday, on June 3rd, the Friday before we lost him, I went in for another growth ultrasound at 32 weeks. Yeah, and I mentioned to the ultrasound tech that he wasn't moving as much, but he passed all of the things that he needed to on his ultrasound. So she was like, he's happy, healthy baby. And then I went in for a regular appointment the Tuesday after that. And I was by myself again because my husband was at work. And I went in and I was waiting a really long time in the waiting room before I even got pulled back, which was just really stressful for me because I was already like, he's not moving as much. I really want to talk to the doctor about it instead of just seeing the ultrasound tech. Like, I want to talk to somebody again. I want them to take me seriously. Something isn't right. And I got to see Dr. Sayer. She was running behind because she got caught up with a couple other patients, and I was the last patient of the day. I talked to Dr. Sayer, and it seemed like she was actually, like, taking me seriously. She was like, yeah, that's not normal. Let's look into that a little bit more. Let's get you up on the table and do the Doppler first, which is just to check the heart rate. And she was searching for a couple minutes, and she told me she wasn't finding his heartbeat as strong as she would like to, but I knew what she was hearing on the Doppler was my pulse. It wasn't Finn's heartbeat. So she brought me in for an ultrasound, and while I was waiting for the ultrasound tech to prep the room, I was messaging my mom. I was like, I'm trying really hard not to freak out right now. I don't know what to do. They weren't really able to hear his heartbeat on the Doppler, and now they're taking me in for an ultrasound. So my mom asked me to FaceTime her. That way she was at least kind of there, and I had somebody with me.
Right.
I don't know, looking back, if my mom knew what was going to happen, but I'm glad she was there. The ultrasound tech scanned over my belly for not even 2 seconds, and I saw it on the screen, and like I knew in my head, but obviously she couldn't tell me what was wrong. Mm-hmm. But he didn't look like a baby. It looked like a blob, and I didn't see any movement, and it didn't look like him, and I knew something was wrong. So then Dr. Sayer came in, and she said, I'm so sorry, but the baby has passed. And I don't really remember if I even had any words to say at that point. I just know that my mom said, what did she say? And I said, he's gone. And then my mom started screaming, and then I had to hang up on her because I couldn't process what was happening. I just had to hang up on her, and she basically, Dr. Sayer gave me a hug, and she kind of gave me the rundown. She's like, when you're this far along, you don't have the option for a DNC. You have to deliver. And she gave me the opportunity to choose how I wanted to do that. She said that I could go in and do a vaginal delivery and they would induce me, or I could do a C-section, which for me, I was already planning on opting for a C-section because of my other health issues. I have an immune disorder called MCAS, which basically makes me allergic to life. Some of those things that I'm allergic to can be pain and stress, and that's basically what labor is. So I didn't want to risk going into anaphylaxis for having a baby to begin with, but I opted in for a C-section, and she's like, okay, you can go home, you can get some things together, and then you can come back to the hospital tomorrow. And I was like, no, we're going now. I cannot go home knowing that he is dead inside of me. I can't do that.
Right.
But then there was also the fact that my husband wasn't there. So we had to tell my husband. And I could not get the words out. I called the tutoring center that he was working at part-time that night. And I was like, I need you to put my husband on the phone. And they're like, well, we can't do that. And I'm like, put him on the phone. Like, I was ready to fight a receptionist. I don't know why she wouldn't let me talk to him. Like, I understand that he is with a student, but this is an emergency. So we finally get my husband on the phone, and Dr. Sayer is the one to break the news to him because I couldn't do it. And he drove over and met me at the OB's office. And I remember him walking in the door, and he started screaming, and he started crying, and I just sat there, and I don't think I had really cried at that point yet. I was still pretty in shock and numb, and It's like one of those things where I almost kind of knew it was going to happen from the beginning of the pregnancy. When we started bleeding, I just had a feeling that we weren't going to be able to take him home. I felt like there was something wrong from the beginning of that pregnancy. And we went into Methodist that night, and my friend Ari met us there. And we all had a good cry sitting there waiting for the doctor and everything to come in. My mom and dad rushed out to Des Moines that night. They live in Cedar Rapids, so it was a 2.5-hour drive. So once my mom was there, we went in for a C-section, and I opted to be completely put under because I didn't think that I could be awake. I didn't think that I could be awake and not hear him cry when he was delivered. And looking back, I do have some regrets for that, just because I kind of missed the entire first 24 hours with him because I was so drugged up, essentially.
Yeah.
But after having my rainbow daughter and having a C-section with her, I think I made the right decision with Finn, because I don't think I would have been able to handle the silence when he was born. I don't think I would have been able to do it. But the unfortunate thing about when you're put under general for a C-section is that they don't allow anybody else in the room with you. So my husband and my mom stayed outside the operating room waiting. And Finn was born at 11:32 p.m. on June 7th of 2022. He weighed 3 pounds, 15.8 ounces, so he was just below 4 pounds. And he had red wavy hair. He had my nose. He was absolutely adorable. And he just looked like he was sleeping. He didn't look like there was anything wrong with him. He just looked like he fell asleep. And that was it. So when I woke up, I was still pretty in and out of it, but I was really thankful that my mom had taken pictures of him within that first 24 hours, because I am still able to look back and see what he looked like within that first 24 hours, because I don't remember that, obviously.
Right.
But something about stillbirths is that there is decomposition involved while you're handling your baby. And we got a cuddle cot for him, which I think somebody in one of the previous episodes that you had done mentioned. A cuddle cot is essentially just a bassinet, but it's got a cooling system to it. So it helps keep the body cool and tries to slow decomposition so you have more time. Which I'm super grateful that we had that, but I think it was also kind of defective because it didn't really work a lot of the time. But they put him in a preemie onesie, so he was dressed, and even the preemie onesie was gigantic. He had a hat, a crocheted hat that they had donated, and a crocheted blanket that they had donated. So I was really thankful that he had, an outfit and clothes and things to be put into, because obviously that's not something you prepare for.
No, not at all.
Yeah. We were able to stay with him until Friday. So we had him Tuesday night, and then we were able to stay with him until Friday because I had a C-section. So I was able to stay in the hospital longer, which I'm thankful for, because I've heard stories of people having to get their baby away within 24 hours and be out of there, and that's just mortifying to me.
Yeah.
I didn't really cry the entire time that we were there after the C-section. It was so numb that it didn't really feel real. And then I had the most amazing nurse. Her name was Michaela. She is no longer at Blank. She has since moved. But she just went above and beyond to make sure that we had everything we needed, that we got all the pictures, that we got all the things. And she was just awesome. She was with me every day while I was in the hospital. Obviously, she wasn't on the night shift, but she was with me every day. And I'm really thankful for how the stay went at Blank. I think when it really started to hit me was when I had to hand him over to our nurse Michaela for her to bring him to the morgue downstairs, because we opted for an autopsy because I wanted to know what was wrong.
Right.
I don't understand how a healthy baby just dies. That's not how it works.
Right.
And his autopsy came back fine. Absolutely no answers. Nothing.
It was just like a fluke thing.
Well, that's what they said. And then I got involved in a support group called No Foot Too Small, which is a really big group based in Iowa, but they service like everywhere. We have moms and dads from other states, and they have both virtual meetings, in-person meetings, events. They're a nonprofit, essentially, that their main thing is that they are trying to build birthing and bereavement suites in hospitals, so that way you're not on the regular maternity floor when you're dealing with that, because it's really hard. You know, you go into a room that's supposed to be having live babies, and there's like car seat safety signs, safe sleep signs, all these other things, and it's just not the area that you want to be in. So I think they're really cool, but they also are really big on connecting families, and I connected with so many people right away. I went to my first meeting 2 weeks after we had lost Finn, so I was really fresh at that point in time, but I was really glad to have that kind of community to get into.
Right.
And that community is actually the reason that we got answers for why Finn died. One of the moms, Courtney, who lives out in North Carolina, had recommended Dr. Kleiman at Yale to me. So she had lost her son, Henry, the September before we lost Finn, so not too much further before Finn.
Yeah.
And she was able to get answers from him. So she's like, here's all of the information. You know, they do placental research at Yale. They do stillbirths from, you know, certain weeks and all the things. And they just look at the placental slides and see what they can find. So Dr. Kleiman, I want to give like a super huge shout out to him. He has been really important in the stillbirth prevention community in general. Backing up, you know, I kind of want to ask you, you know, I know you've obviously talked to other people about their pregnancy loss, but before it happened to somebody that you knew or loved, did you ever even think of stillbirth as a possibility in like modern day age?
So for my personal experience with my first, with Bella, I always had like a dread, like it wasn't real, but I was also so young. So in my mind, it was like, it could totally happen. But like, I think it was more like I was just nervous. I was nervous about that pregnancy altogether. I was only 17 when I was pregnant. So like for me, I always kind of had that like, kind of how like you had like said, like when things started, you kind of already had a feeling like you weren't going to bring your baby home. But I had that feeling. And I had medical issues, but everything ended up working. When I got pregnant with my second, I think I was just more in like a pregnancy bliss, and because things worked out so well the previous time, I didn't think anything of it. I have been fortunate enough where I've only had 2 pregnancies, and we are done, so I won't have to worry about that. But after having my children and learning my other friends and other people in my lives, their experience, it kind of opened my eyes to it, but I was very blinded to it. I want to say definitely my second pregnancy. Like I said, I was in complete pregnancy bliss that I didn't even think about it. I was worried about similar complications. I had preeclampsia with my first pregnancy, so I was like, oh, what if I have to do that again? And I guess I was worried about not being able to deliver the way I wanted to. But I guess other health stuff, when it came to like stillbirth, or you know, once we got out of like the miscarriage window, like before you announced,
like the 12-week window, basically. Yeah.
I wasn't worried about it. I know that sounds really selfish of me to think about that.
No, it's not selfish. And the reason I ask is because, you know, doctors don't warn you that it's a possibility. Yeah. They don't talk to you about that. You know, miscarriage is, I'm glad that it's talked about more. I absolutely am super glad that it's talked about more, and it's becoming more of a normal thing to speak up about your experience, because it is such a common thing. You know, you hear a lot about early miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And personally, I had heard a lot about SIDS, you know, sudden infant death after birth, obviously. You know, you see all the things about safe sleep, SIDS prevention, making sure kids are dressed appropriately, you know, whatever that may be. But nobody talked to me about stillbirth. being a possibility. Nobody warned me. And that's wrong. I know that there is the big Count the Kicks initiative, which is amazing, but I was counting the kicks, right? And it still didn't get anybody to take me seriously. So it's one of those things where it needs to be talked about more, and there needs to be more research into it. And that's what Dr. Kleiman is doing, and it's amazing. I'm going to throw a little statistic in there because I did homework. So according to the CDC, every year in the U.S. specifically, there are over 21,000 stillbirths a year. And a stillbirth is defined between 20 weeks and full term.
Okay.
So that's where that range is. But, SIDS, where we hear so much about it, there's only 3,400 here. Now, obviously, 3,400 is 3,400 too many. Yes. Anybody losing their baby is awful, and it shouldn't happen to anybody. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. But those numbers are so different, and you hear so many things about one, but you don't hear anything about stillbirth, and that's frustrating. So what Dr. Kleiman is doing is he is studying the placenta itself, and he has been pushing for measuring the placenta during pregnancy. Oh, okay. So what he gave us, I actually had the placental report pulled up because I wanted to reference it. So Finn's placenta ended up being in the 0.23rd percentile for his gestation. So that's way less than the first percentile. And there are 3 things that can contribute to a small placenta, essentially, according to his research, which are immunologic rejection, what was the other one? Chronic decreased maternal perfusion, so lack of blood flow. And then the third one is a genetic abnormality. Ours was a genetic abnormality. So he was able to look at the placenta and the way that the cells and everything else were. I can't get into like the super detaily things because I don't understand that stuff. Yeah. But he was able to determine that it was a genetic thing. And his report said that it was probably a random event, but we did seek genetic counseling just to be sure. And the genetic counselor told us, chance of recurrence is probably less than 1%. So that was, reassuring for us, but it was still, I was happy to have answers. Yes. But it made me more angry than anything because I was like, if his placenta was this small, why did nobody notice? Why did nobody say anything?
No one knows to test for it? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so it's not normal to measure the placenta currently in our standard of care. It's not standard of care unless it's indicated by something specific. But even then, there was no method to measure the placenta. Like, there was no put in place, this is what size it should be, this is what size it is. Nothing to reference, no way to make a decision on, like, if we should deliver now, if we should wait, what should we do? And again, that's what Dr. Kleiman is working on. But, it made me angry that there was something that could have been done that wasn't. And that was in no way my doctor's fault, because they were just following what they've been trained to do. They did all of the testing that they were indicated to do, and he passed all of it. Mm-hmm. But being in the loss community and having referred other people to Dr. Kleiman, or having talked to other people that Courtney's referred to Dr. Kleiman, there's so many people out there who have lost their kids because of a small placenta. And it's just really frustrating that doctors don't have the ability to see the research, I guess.
I'm trying to find the correct wording. I know I want to say it, I just don't know how to say it. Is there a way to change that standard of care? Is there a way to push that to get that done so they are measuring the placenta?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I ran into with my rainbow pregnancy with my daughter, Rowan. Side note, she is 10 months old now, and her middle name is Finnegan after her brother, so Rowan Finnegan. But with my pregnancy with her, it was really stressful. Pregnancy after loss is a beast that I thought I was ready for, and I absolutely was not. So, we did kind of the same situation where we had extra monitoring, all of the things, but my pregnancy with her was also awful. I hated being pregnant both times, absolutely hated it. And I know some people feel guilty for saying that, but if you hate it, you hate it. Some people love it, and I feel like they're lying to me.
Some people absolutely hated it. I know me personally, I think with my daughter's pregnancy, my first daughter, Bella, I hated the beginning. Yeah. That was also because I was in high school, and nothing sucks more than having morning sickness when you're in high school the second time around. And then I guess being pregnant in high school was just terrible anyway.
Well, yeah.
And then with my second pregnancy, I hated the first couple trimesters. Oh my gosh, trimesters.
Yeah.
Yep. But then once I got to that sweet spot, I was fine until the end, and then I couldn't wear my shoes and stuff anymore, and I was like, I hate this, and I don't want this anymore. Like,
get this baby out of me.
Yes, I would feel like there was only like a sweet spot where I was like, oh, I love this so much, but then after that, I was like, no, like I'm done. Yeah. I can't wear shoes. I can't go to work. My feet are so swollen. Get it out of me. But no, I think everyone's journey is different. So if people say they hated pregnancy, I mean, I understand. You don't have to convince me.
Right. So with her, I was trying really hard to push for measuring her placenta because I was obviously traumatized by losing a kid for something that was not even looked at.
Rightfully so.
And nobody would do it.
Like absolutely. They refused to, or they didn't know how to?
They said that there was no medical evidence to back it up, even though there absolutely is. Like, Yale is Yale. It's not like Dr. Kleiman is just out there, like, doing this for shits and giggles. Like, he's out there doing actual research that's been proven. But there is, so measuretheplacenta.org is something that Dr. Kleiman also kind of works with, and they have a list of doctors who will measure placentas. Okay. Unfortunately, the closest one to the Des Moines area is Mayo Clinic, and that's too far. I can't do that. So, I had a really hard time with that. Nobody was willing to do it, but I was like, I just need more monitoring, because even if you're not going to measure the placenta, I need you to make sure everything, like, this baby has to come home with me.
Yeah.
Has to come home with me. Plain and simple. I can't do that again. So with her pregnancy, same kind of deal. Really, really hard time. We had our anatomy scan, and so earlier I said marginal cord insertion happens in 6% of pregnancies, and it really should not happen again. It's supposed to be like a one-off thing. Rowan did not have marginal cord insertion, but she had filamentous cord insertion.
Okay.
Which means not only was it at the end, but it's a 3-vessel cord. It was also unwound.
Oh, no.
So, and it wasn't protected. So that was another thing. And they were like, nope, same deal that we would do with Finn. It's just every 4 weeks growth ultrasounds. And I'm like, okay. One of the doctors at perinatal, which is also like a maternal fetal medicine, which I know some people call, but here in Des Moines, it's perinatal through Unity Point. And one of the doctors there mentioned potentially doing arterial and umbilical Dopplers, like measuring the blood flow at least, to make sure that at least she's getting the blood flow she needs. And I was like, yes, let's do it. And then my next appointment, the other doctor that I saw, because you never see the same doctor. It's always like you have to see the whole team. The next doctor that I saw was like, no, we're not doing that.
Did you, even after you protest, no, I really want to do this, he just denied you, no, we're not doing it?
Correct. Yep. He denied it, and the nurse sympathized with me. Like, she could see me crying, and she's like, she stayed in the room with the conversation that I had with the doctor, because she could tell that I was so upset. So I'm thankful for her. I don't actually know her name, but I know she still works there. So thank you to her if you somehow randomly listen. But he agreed that, the only reason that we would do it is if she was growth restricted. So, okay. And then, he keep moving along. I start bleeding with her around 22 weeks, and it's like heavy blood, and it's fine as long as I'm sitting and not moving, but anytime I move around, anytime I do anything, I'm bleeding. So I'm panicking. They're not able to give me any reason for the bleeding. I'm in and out of the maternal OB/GYN ER or whatever you want to call it, OBED, and they're like, we can't see anything on the ultrasound that would be causing it. You know, your cervix is bleeding like a little bit, but it's not like anything major. And I'm showing them pictures of my bloody toilet paper. I'm like, this is what is happening to me. Like, I need you to acknowledge that this is real. So they essentially ended up putting me on modified bed rest, which is where I can, move from bed to bathroom to couch, but nothing else. So I left. My last day of work was July 27th last year, which really sucked because I wasn't ready for another hard pregnancy. And then I went, I think, 2 or 3 months unpaid at work while I was waiting for my leave to get figured out. That was not a fun time. But then that my work finally accommodated me working from home. Mind you, I work a desk job. Like, it was very easy for me to be able to work from home, but for some reason, somebody up on the higher ladder was fighting it. I don't know who it was. Thankfully, a couple of the managers, I think, went to bat for me, and they're like, you need to let her come back. Like, there's no reason.
Because not only are you stressing about just your pregnancy, you're stressing about finances and, like, you know what I mean? So that's, like, even more on your plate. So it's just going to make things even worse for you.
Exactly. And, my husband was at that time, he still wasn't teaching because he was still working on getting his master's. And then he started teaching in August, like late August, but he didn't get his first paycheck until September. And then, I was out since July 27th. So it was like this whole gap of, we're broke as shit. We don't know what to do. I can't do anything. I can't move. And it was just awful. Thankfully, we had a really big community built up after we lost Finn, that we were posting so much about our pregnancy with Rowan that people were able to pitch in and help us get like groceries and pay bills and stuff. Like my godmom Jo, I want to give her a big shout out. Thank you so much for all the help you gave us. Insane.
Yeah.
But and then I finally get to work from home, and then 2 weeks later I'm admitted to the hospital on bed rest. So it was like, what's the point? And they wouldn't let me work from my hospital bed, even though it was just a computer. And I'm like, why? So I'm on bed rest. I was admitted, I think, October 27th. So like exactly 3 months after I went on bed rest at home. October 27th, I was admitted to the hospital on bed rest with her because she was growth restricted. And they did the arterial Doppler, and her blood flow was reduced. So I was like, I'm not going home. You have to admit me. You are going to keep me on constant monitoring. I am not going home. So it was kind of my fault that I got admitted, but also I feel like it was a good idea.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And originally they weren't going to do the C-section until 38 weeks, and then it backed up to 37 weeks, and then once I got admitted to the hospital, we backed it up to 36 weeks. So she was delivered via C-section at 36 weeks, and then the trauma of that was that her left lung didn't inflate, so she ended up intubated in the NICU. And, I didn't get to hear her cry either, so that's why I went back and I was like, I don't think I could have handled with Finn, because, at least I got to see Rowan, like, move. She wasn't screaming or crying, but at least I could see her move. I don't think I would have been able to do that with Finn. Okay, so we had Rowan, and she ended up in the NICU. Thankfully, she was actually able to be discharged and come home with us the same day that I went home. So she bounced back really quick. It was great. While we were in the hospital on bed rest, there is an organization here in Iowa called Cradling New Life, who is a nonprofit, and they were able to pay basically like an entire month's worth of bills for us while we were in the hospital, which was amazing and helped out so much too. But backing up back to Finn, because he's my main reason that I'm here, is the things that really mattered to us in the hospital were the blanket and the hat that he got, because I crochet at home and I was making him a blanket and a hat, but I obviously didn't get to finish it because I was not prepared to lose him at 32 weeks. So I was really thankful for what we got. It just really sucked because they were so big on him. It was just like another reminder of how tiny he was, And then we also got a book that meant a lot. It's called On the Night You Were Born, which is really sweet. You can read it to living kids too, and it applies just as much, but it's got like that extra deep cut for kids when you lose them, and it's like, oh. So when we went home, Dakota, my husband, is a really big reader and a nerd and all of the things. And he was like, I'm going to read to him every single night. So he, for like the entire first year, read him a bedtime story every single night. So that's kind of why we started Friends of Finnegan, which is an organization that we run. And what we do is we make handmade items and donate books to Blink Children's Hospital for pregnancy and infant loss. So we make, blankets, hats, booties, cuddle cradles, which are like almost like the little handmade cradles for really small infant loss or pregnancy loss. We make all of those things, and then we also donate the books, which are mostly bedtime stories, but we also have grief books and ones that explain loss to living siblings, because I know that's kind of a hard thing to explain to a younger kid who is expecting a baby. What do you tell a kid who doesn't really understand the concept of death at that point? So we donate all of those things every year on Finn's birthday, June 7th. And the first year went way bigger than I expected it to be. I expected like 10 people to be involved, and I think we have upwards of like 150 people in our private Facebook group right now, which is super cool. Obviously, not everybody in the group is actually making items, but people are still wanting to participate, keep track of that. But that's why I ended up creating a public Facebook page too. That way people don't have to be in the private group and they can just watch our posts.
Right.
But I'm super thankful for the community that we built and being able to have Friends of Finnegan, because I've always wanted to be a mom. Well, no, that's okay. Backing up. That is a damn lie. I did not want kids until I met my husband, but I've always wanted to be a mom since I was in like the end game relationship, essentially. Like when I was sure that this is what I wanted, I immediately could not think of being anything else besides a mom. But even though I am a mom to Finn, it's not in the way that I had hoped, right? So Friends of Finnegan is kind of my way of mothering him, I guess, being able to put all of that grief and all of those feelings and everything into something tangible that I can help other people with. And it also keeps my hands busy and my brain quiet. So
that's awesome. I love it when people can find those outlets to really help them. I know this is my personal outlet. I had shared my own personal trauma on it. I've gotten what I needed out of it, just kind of like validation, but I also wanted to help other people. So that's why I was like, I don't want to just talk about me. I want other people to like tell me like what's going on, because everyone experiences something, and just to be able to, for you to be like, this is what we're doing and we're going to help all these other people. That is just amazing. I love it that you're using the trauma that you got from losing your son and you're doing something good with it. I think that's amazing, is you're not just letting this trauma like hold you back and like, you can be sad, but you're doing something more, not only to help yourself, but other people. And I think that's just amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Being sad is definitely a frequent for me still. I will say that, like, I am definitely still sad. And I think a lot of people with grief in general expect you to get over it like within a year or whatever. Like, yeah, that first year is really, really hard, but it never goes away.
No.
There are lost moms that I've talked to who their loss was over 10 years ago, and they're still choked up every now and then. It hits you randomly.
Mhm.
It's not always on the birthdays or the due dates or whatever. It's just sometimes something hits you. Like sometimes for me, I look at my daughter and I'm like, that's what my son should have done. Like we should have been hitting these milestones with Finn. And it also doesn't help that they are basically twins. They look exactly the same. So there's that too. But you know, I'm thankful that I can kind of see like the girl version of what he would have been. But also at the same time, like I'm just kind of dumbfounded sometimes. Like I just stare at her and I'm like, are you even real? Because I don't. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know how this is possible. This isn't normal for me. This is new for me because my previous kid died. Like it's a whole different ballgame, but it just pops up randomly, especially at like 3 a.m. after she wakes up and I put her back to bed. I'm sitting up because I'm not a man and I can't fall asleep in 2 seconds. I'm sitting up in bed at 3 a.m. trying to go back to sleep, and I'm like, here's my brain going and going and going. Why am I upset about being up at 3 a.m.? Because I didn't get to be up at 3 a.m. with my son. Like, I should be thankful that I'm able to do this, but at the same time, it sucks. So there's a lot of conflicting feelings with that, with grief and trying to be happy, and it's okay to feel both of those feelings simultaneously.
Right.
Happiness and grief can coexist, absolutely, but it's a hard reality to grasp, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. One thing I was going to ask you, I was going to circle back with all of the testing and things that you did to get the answers. Did you have to pay for that, or was that something that like you're just like, I'm donating this, and if you could give me the details, like how did that work?
Yeah, so with the testing with Dr. Kleiman specifically, so I was thankful to have double insurance coverage at the time. So I was 24, so I was still under my parents' insurance when I lost Finn, so that was helpful. But also I had Medicaid as secondary insurance because I was disabled and I've got all my other medical stuff, so I was able to have that. And also the extensions were longer because of after COVID.
Right.
They took it away from me now, but back then I was still double covered, and thankfully I didn't have to pay anything out of pocket. Dr. Kleiman, the insurance that they take, they won't take Iowa Medicaid, obviously, because they're not in Iowa. But at that point with my parents' insurance, I had well met my deductible, so I didn't have to pay anything. It was all covered. I think Courtney may have had to pay. I don't remember how much that she ended up having to pay, but she said I don't think she said it was anywhere like outrageous. I feel like it was definitely under $500, which, you know, if you're a 24-year-old who's working at BioLife, that's still a lot of money, but you know,
money, right.
For in the long term, you know, under $500 to potentially get answers for why you lost a kid is definitely good.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I feel like not knowing and like having that unknown would be way worse than paying the $500 to figure out what happened or to get some sort of answers.
Yeah, and that's the hard part too, is that, you know, you go into this and you don't know that you're going to get answers. Even with Dr. Kleiman, you know, there's no guarantee that you're going to get answers, and you have to kind of, before you jump into all of that testing, if it's something you really want, you have to make peace with the fact that you might not get answers, because there are a lot of people out there that don't have answers. And, you know, I'm not saying that there isn't a reason for a pregnancy loss, because, like I said before, healthy babies don't just die. That's not something that happens. There has always got to be a scientific reason, but it might be something that we haven't discovered yet, or that we're not aware of yet. So that's the other piece to it, is that we don't necessarily know. Doing, you know, your body could be doing crazy things. It could not be your body. It could be something else. But it might not be something that we've discovered at this point. So I could not make peace with the fact that I might not get an answer. So if I didn't get an answer from Dr. Kleiman, I honestly don't know what I would have done. But and there are people out there that are okay with not having answers because they are, you know, secure enough in their faith in the universe or whatever thing they believe in, that they are able to accept that. I am not that person. So all the power to the people who are able to accept no answers and just be at peace with that. But
right. No, if I was in your shoes, I would feel the exact same way, that I would need to have some sort of answers. I couldn't just be like, put it into the universe and be like, okay, well, there was a reason. No, I want to find out what happened. Like I can't, my brain doesn't work. It's very scientifical. Like I need to know what happened.
Right. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. I was an engineering major. My husband's undergrad was in biochemistry. So both of us are like, we need answers now.
For sure. Like, no, I bet.
We are not going to wait on this.
Do you feel like, so I don't know if you explained, were you trying with your second child, or was that just like another like, oh, if it happens, it happens?
Yeah. So when we decided, we were trying for her. When we decided that we were going to have another baby, that was a really hard decision, because my husband was like, I don't know if we can have a baby in my first year of teaching. Like, that's a lot. And me, on the other hand, I was like, I don't know what I am if I'm not a mom. Because again, like I said before, I am a mom to Finn, but it's not in the way that I wanted. And I was having like this whole existential crisis. I was like, we need to have a baby. Like, we need to have a baby.
Yeah.
So 6 months after we lost Finn is when I was able to get pregnant with Rowan, but it was not without medical intervention. So I have PCOS. So that wasn't diagnosed until I did a fertility workup before we had Rowan, because I couldn't do the waiting 2.5 years to have a baby again. I couldn't do that. So we went to the OB and I was like, I need to explore something to see what's keeping me from being able to conceive. And essentially, I just wasn't ovulating. So that's all it was. So we got on Femara, which I think Clomid is what used to be really common for medication, like just to induce ovulation, but Femara is one of the newer ones. Okay. And it worked really well. The first round that we did was at the lowest dose, and it did not cause me to ovulate. So the second round, we upped the dose, which is like the normal dose. Most people don't ovulate with the lower one, but they always got to start you on the lower, I think. But we did 2 months of the middle dose, and we had a fertility workup at U of I. They actually have a West Des Moines office for fertility, which is really nice. So I was able to go there and be worked up there, and they scanned my ovaries, and the ultrasound tech made me laugh because she's like, your ovaries look like chocolate chip cookies with how many little cysts and things are in there. And I was like, what? What does that mean?
Oh gosh.
So apparently that's what polycystic ovaries look like, is chocolate chip cookies to an ultrasound tech.
Okay.
But the problem was not with lack of eggs. The problem was with them not releasing. Like, there were plenty of follicles in there, but they hadn't been releasing because I wasn't ovulating. But the ultrasound tech freaked me out because she's like, well, you definitely ovulated this month because there are 3 follicles that went through on this ovary alone. So I'm sitting here panicking, thinking that if I get pregnant this month, I'm going to have triplets. Like, okay. Freaking out. And I'm like, no, there's no way. I can't do that. I can't do multiples. I can barely do one. I can't do that. But the fertility doctor was basically like, if you don't get pregnant this month, we'll do some more testing. And maybe 2 days later, I got a positive pregnancy test. So
that's crazy.
Yes, thankfully, we only had to try for 3 months for Rowan because we had the medication to help. So that was a lot more reassuring, and to me, it kind of gives some hope towards if we decide to have any other kids biologically. I'm still very conflicted on that because of how hard both pregnancies were. Obviously, right. Even with the living child, it was awful. So I'm conflicted on whether or not I would be birthing another kid. We definitely want more kids, though. Mm-hmm. So, but it's kind of reassuring to know that I have options, essentially.
Right. I know it sounds really crazy, but when you had said that you had bleeding in your second pregnancy and that really worried you. Could have been that you were having a period, because I know it is possible that you can still have your period and you have been ovulating, because there have been times where people get pregnant while they're already pregnant. It doesn't happen often, but it could. Yeah. And just how you had said that there was already like 3, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
You had a period and that's why you were bleeding so much?
I honestly, I'm not 100% sure. The one thing about PCOS is that, like, most women with PCOS have a really irregular period. I am the opposite. Mine is regular down to the hour. Okay. So my periods are really regular and they only last 5 days and they're super light. So it's never really come across my mind that was a possibility. It definitely could be. One cool thing though sorry, I've got my computer screen. I tried to lock it and it's still bright as hell, but the placental report is in front of me, so it reminded me of something. Is that with my daughter, so Dr. Kleiman also does placental research for developmental disabilities and autism research, which is pretty cool. And Finn's placenta with the genetic abnormality would have been in line with what they're seeing with autism. Placental research. So it's kind of like one of those things where you can get a heads up. It doesn't mean that your kid's going to be autistic or have a developmental delay, obviously, but there is a link to it. And having this testing beforehand can kind of give you a heads up and get you earlier access to resources.
Right.
So we had Rowan's tested out of curiosity, and hers had the same thing. So hers had the same thing, and she did test positive on the test for living children. Is called placenta ASD, so autism spectrum disorder placenta ASD test. That one was not covered by insurance because it wasn't like one of those things where it was following up on an autopsy or anything else. It was just kind of an elective test. So I may still owe Yale some money for that. So sorry to Yale billing department that you now have me on collections. I'm just poor and I really wanted answers. But yeah, hers tested positive, and she's had some developmental delays and been in physical therapy and stuff and everything. But she's doing.
Know that to do those tests to be like, there could be a possibility, so at least keep an eye out for it.
Right. It's super cool. It's super cool to know that that's even an option.
Yeah.
And my husband, he's going to get mad at me if I say this on a podcast, but I'm going to say it anyways. My husband is definitely on the spectrum. He's not officially diagnosed. He did not go through any testing when he was younger, but he's got the happy flappies. He's got stims. He's got all the things. So he's definitely on the spectrum. Obviously, I don't like the terms high functioning and low functioning because you can function as a human no matter what. But
yes,
he's obviously on the end of the spectrum where he is fully independent and able to do things. But it was kind of nice to have a heads up in case that's something that we run into with our daughter too. So
no, I think that is really nice because I know right now, my personal life with my youngest daughter, we believe she is on the spectrum, but then having to go through all the extra tests and get her diagnosed. And I know a lot of things right now because we've kind of always thought that, but like, because there were certain things that she did, but it wasn't necessarily like alarming. So she would like loud noises always set her off, and like she would line up her toys, and she was just doing all those little things that you should just kind of watch out. And in school and stuff like that, she's amazing. She knows her stuff. She's really good with numbers. And right now we're working with getting her diagnosed also with dyslexia because that's something that she's been dealing with, and also can go side to side with autism. But I know with a lot of changes with the how schooling is done in Iowa, and a lot of testing stuff has changed. Yeah. Now we have to go through Iowa City, and now we're on a huge waiting list, and we're not even scheduled. And this is something we requested, I want to say almost the end of last school year, and it's still just like we're just kind of playing the waiting game. And then even when we do get an appointment, how long are those appointments? Like, it's just going to be like an uphill battle even to get a diagnosis so she can get the help she needs.
Right. And especially like with girls specifically getting diagnosed on the spectrum, it's so much harder because girls are so much better at masking. They don't have as many obvious symptoms, I guess, if that's the word you want to use, but, you know, symptoms of ASD. Like, boys are almost overdiagnosed because they show so many signs, and then girls are, like, left to suffer in the background. We don't get resources.
Well, and then the symptoms that girls do show are, like, these are good things for girls. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost shown, like, a positive light. It was like, yes, but, like, they could still use the help, too.
Right.
Because I also believe... I also have not been diagnosed, but I believe that I am somewhat on the spectrum, and same with my husband. There's obvious signs, especially when you know there's certain signs, and you're like, how did everyone miss this?
Who's neurotypical anymore? Nobody. Exactly. We're all on the spectrum. We're all neurodivergent. There's something wrong with all of us.
Yes. But no, that is awesome to find out that, I mean, at least that somewhere in the world they are working on this kind of stuff to help people. And everything that you explained too with getting the the placenta testing and stuff like that to learn, like, that is something I didn't know at all. And I am so happy that you shared that information. I do plan on putting all the information. If you can share all that stuff with me, I'll make sure it's all in this, so I can make sure we are getting the correct information. So if anyone listens to this, they can know the routes that they need to know. I wish some of my past guests would have known some of that stuff too, because I think that would have really helped them. I know the two right now on my head. So,
and I do think, you know, it's... Hospitals, I think, are required to keep placental slides up to, like, a certain amount of years. I don't know how many years that is, so depending on how long ago their losses are, it's always a possibility that the hospital might still have slides on hand that they could submit, but unfortunately, it's one of those things where if you don't know about it, you don't know about it until it's too late, and I'm very thankful to have the community and resources that I was given. And I think in one of your last episodes, one of the girls was talking about the funeral home that she got the cremation paid for and stuff. The name of that funeral home is Hamilton's. So Hamilton's Funeral Home in the Des Moines area does free funerals, free cremations for any kid under the age of 18. So,
okay. That's great information to know.
Yeah, it's a great service that they have. They also have grief support groups for child loss that they offer, at least at the West Des Moines one, which is a kind of over by Valley West area. And they also gave us a garden dancer, which is like it's like a metal statue of a boy running in a garden, and then it's got stars and his name, Finnegan, on it. So it's something that you can just, like, put in the ground. It's like a big stake, and they give those to you for free. So for the first year, I think, or 6 months or a year, they leave it in their butterfly garden at Hamilton's, and then after that is when you can come pick it up and you can keep it. So they have a lot of really good resources, and they gave us, like, a little plaque with his picture on it when we left there. They still send us stuff every now and then, like a Christmas tree ornament. Like, they're really cool. They're a great funeral home for child loss and pregnancy loss. They're amazing.
That is awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to make sure we give them a shout out too, because there's so many things that I guess people don't even realize that are out there, especially if you've never experienced it. So, like, having talking to people and be like, all these resources, and it was like, I didn't even know this was a thing. Like an everyday person who doesn't necessarily come to contact with those forms of grief or trauma, you would have no idea. So yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that information. I'm going to make sure that we give them shout outs and give those information to people who might stumble upon this video and not realize that those resources are out there.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I wish I didn't know about the resources, but I'm also glad I do know about them so I could give them to other people. But like our friends at Finnegan organization, so I have a link tree put up where I have, like, links to different keepsakes and stuff that you can get for stillbirth and pregnancy loss. like Molly Bears is another organization. I'm just like name dropping a bunch of people, but Molly Bears is awesome. They make teddy bears in the weight of what your baby was when they were born. And they will like put embroidery on it. Our Finnegan bear has a bow tie and a little handkerchief that's super cute. But yeah, so they make it in the same weight of your baby. And unfortunately, they do have a wait list because a lot of people need it. And it does cost $35, but it's more like a wait list fee. Like the $35 isn't paying for the bear because the bears are made by volunteers. It's more just to hold your place. But they do have patches that they sew onto the bears, and if you donate patches, you can get moved up on the wait list. So there's that too.
Oh, okay. That's so awesome. Well, is there anything else you're wanting to share today?
I don't think so. Thank you for having me and letting me ramble on about all my things. But
for sure. Alrighty, well, we're gonna wrap up this episode. Kara, where would you like people to find you?
Yeah, you can find Friends of Finnegan on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, we have our public page. Facebook, we have a public page, but we also have a private group on Facebook. That is more for people who are making items and people who want to share their stories, maybe people who received Friends of Finnegan items. We would love to hear from you if you are out there. But the public page is more of a place where you can follow along with what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure I include all of that stuff in the description along with other organizations that we talked about today. I'm going to make sure that we put all that information in there so people can find it. If you want to share your story on the podcast, go ahead and shoot me an email over at sorryfortraumadumpingpodcast@gmail.com. It is really long, but you won't forget it. You can also find us or find me on all the things. I have a Facebook group, Facebook page, Instagram, TikTok, all the jazz. And you can find these episodes on Spotify and YouTube. New episodes come out every Monday. Make sure you share this with your friends, family, anyone that you think would really resonate with this. And like and subscribe and all that stuff. Again, thank you so much, Kara, for coming on, and I truly appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate you too.
And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.